How's it going, everyone? So, usually I do the week's social media news, but this week is a heavy one. I've been sitting here for an hour trying to compose my thoughts and bring you the news as I try to do. I couldn't do this live on Thursday because I was too upset about what was going on in Ukraine. Those of you who know, I'm from Romania, which is a neighbor of Ukraine's. So I really feel, I think it's a horrible situation. I can't imagine what the people there are going through. All I know is how I feel as a Romanian being once again at a border with a war. Romania has a long history of being the front lines of wars where powers intersect and battle it out. And it's horrifying to me. So my thoughts go out to the people of Ukraine, their families, the people of Russia, and all the people who, just like my family and my friends in Romania, are sitting at the border with this conflict, wondering what's next. The other thing is that a lot of people don't know about me is that I wrote my master thesis on how the US media covered the Kosovo War. And I pulled it out this week and reread it. It's been a long time, but I've always had this fascination with how we make sense of the world at times of war. And when war is close to home, um, it changes everything. Americans haven't experienced war on its territory, on the mainland. American civilians haven't been exposed necessarily here at home to the horrors of war. But a lot of Europeans still hear or know stories from their grandparents of how awful, awful it is. A lot of people in other parts of the world have also experienced the heavy weight of war, the toll it takes, even for those who um, survive intact, where their families are intact. So when people ask me what I think about the sanctions, what I think about this and that, somebody the other day called me ignorant. Not somebody I know or that knows me. And I'll admit it, I am ignorant about a lot of the things in this conflict. Um, but it's a very, very complicated situation. So bringing you social media news like the new like button on Instagram stories or what's new with LinkedIn, and a lot is new with LinkedIn, and I will cover that in a minute if you're still with me. Um, that just seems so trivial right now. So I pulled up my thesis, and I was a kid. I was a kid. I was in my early 20s, and I had just witnessed war in Kosovo. I mean, I wasn't in Kosovo. I was in Bulgaria, so we could hear the bombings across the border and see the flashes at night. Being so close, I became very curious. So my thesis, I want to read this to you. The study explores the ideology and discourse used by the New York Times and USA Today to describe the Kosovo conflict as it took its course the week before and after NATO bombing began on March 24, 1999. And it goes on, and the quantitative content analysis of the news coverage measures discourse structures labeled by Noam Chomsky as enlightened nations discourse. This discourse is characteristic of political ideology of the new interventionism. This type of ideology is characterized by bipolar structures of positive self representation and negative other representations, and a master narrative defined by discussions of humanitarianism, portrayals of the United States as a moral and democratic example, and the vilification of Serbia, Serbs, and their leader. So I've always been fascinated with how we try to simplify our understanding of conflict, how we try to simplify and seek easy solutions to what happens in the world. And we tend to gravitate toward these bipolar structures, good versus evil, and there's no gray areas. So, what's happening here is very, very complicated. From a social media perspective, I want to ask people to be kind and to not vilify a whole nation, um, and to ask questions and apply a certain level of kindness and attempts at understanding what is happening. A lot of people are going to need support, and it's still so early on. We don't know what's going to come next. So, having said that, um, I'm going to move into some social media news. Obviously, the Twitter and TikTok in particular and other channels are just buzzing with information and misinformation. Twitter and Facebook have started taking down accounts, a lot of them by mistake. So once again, this discussion of, how do we keep these spaces safe, has resurfaced. Russia has announced that, or Kremlin has announced that they will be blocking parts of Facebook, whatever that means. Um, a lot of Kremlin official channels have been discontinued by Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So um, we're looking at a lot of conversation online, and a lot of it is misinformation. So we have to be cautious about what we believe from what we see there, just as, that's wise to do always at any time. But in this case, it feels like it's so politically charged for Americans once again. Um, and I advise just, checking the sources of the information and having patience. The situation's still evolving. Somebody called me ignorant, um, and I'll take that. I think that we're going to see a lot of name calling. But I think it's wise to not forget about the people of Ukraine in our attempts to put our stamp on the narrative. Sometimes we forget that those who are at the center of this are the people of Ukraine. One of the findings in my study was that the people of Kosovo were forgotten in the discussion about a war on their land. The discourse was mostly focused on the good guys, the United States, and the bad guys, Serbia. And when we focus so narrowly on this good versus evil narrative, we forget about the people who are feeling the heavy impact of what is happening. So, not just in this conflict, in any conflict, I want to encourage you to focus on what is there that we can do to help the people who are affected by this. Um, in other social media news, LinkedIn has announced a number of upcoming changes and features. And so I'll show you what they are very briefly. One of them has to do with the introduction of post analytics in more detail, something that people have been asking for. We also have the upcoming, I think has already been released, but in case you are curious to see how these new audio events for LinkedIn are looking like, this is a desktop view. LinkedIn has also announced podcasts presented by Verizon. And here is a selection of the first few that you could listen to, and you can stream them. You can stream them directly from LinkedIn. I'm not very focused right now. My mind is elsewhere. Still, changes to the social media platforms continue to happen. Another thing that's coming are the video messaging, video meetings, and the introduction of away messages for LinkedIn Messenger. And new network filters that you can apply to see who's in your network, to have an easier way of selecting through. Some of us are connected with thousands of people. It makes it a little easier to find who's within our networks. So that's most of the news from social media this week. And I will get back to sitting here and trying to collect myself do some work and wait and see what's going to come next. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you back here next time.